Hello and welcome to Citizens Forum. This is being filmed on Tuesday, August the 11th in the Memorial Arena in Victoria, BC. I'd like to start by thanking the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes the program happen every week. The first part of Citizens Forum is always the Walter and Jack show, and so we'll start off. I'd just like to say, as this election plays itself out, that to me the real issue is that the country is now run by corporations and it's run for corporate profit. And I think that's an issue that should get some mention in this election, but I don't think it's going to. And just you know, I wrote down a few places where it pops up, and one is housing. Like in a country like Canada, you'd think the housing policy and housing planning was developed for the benefit of the people of Canada. So everybody has good housing at low cost. Now in a democracy, that's what would happen. But what I'm saying is we're a corporate-run nation and we're run for corporate profit. And so look at our housing instead. It costs, you know, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 to buy a condo. They're often, as we've seen, they're often not well made, not built to last. Our neighborhoods are all bisected by streets. They never plan to get people, and especially families, off of busy streets. And it's caused massive debt for a lot of people. So I have a feeling that if we look at housing policy, we'll see that corporate profit, the maximization of corporate profit, is what seems to be happening, and I assume that's what it's all about, because we do live in the second biggest country in the world with only 35 million people. How can land cost more than it costs in probably downtown New York?
Yeah, you know, housing should be a federal issue. You know, one of the problems we saw in Victoria here is we've seen the last few weeks the events of the tent city and all that, looking for places for people to be. You know, as was commented in the papers, that if we made this into a better housing situation in Victoria, homeless people from all across the country would come here. And therefore, and it's a good point, therefore...
But the whole country should have it.
Exactly. We should have, the Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation used to have very good programs for subsidized housing and very, very low interest loans for the guaranteed mortgages. There's, you know, it should be a federal issue.
They built a lot of low-cost social
That's right.
housing, and there was enough housing for people. Now, I think they've artificially created a housing shortage.
Yeah.
And one result of that is huge costs for people who can afford to buy houses, and the other result of the shortage is at the bottom, there's nothing. That's how short we are of housing, that a lot of people haven't got any.
Yeah. So, I mean, those are the sort of things that we're dealing with here in Victoria, in a local place. We're trying to solve what really is a federal, national issue for housing. If we had more direction from Ottawa, then we could even launch into local campaigns, knowing that we had support from federal institutions. So that's not happening. The other thing is, I think about, you know, we're always trying to figure things out on the show, and I learn a lot just talking to you. But when we're looking at the issues around the sewage treatment plant, we're trying to figure out what are the best ways to approach this problem, and why are we so stuck in the middle here of trying to decide which way to go. And one of the reasons is because of the meddling by the federal government, in this case, by dangling this funding in front of us and saying, okay, we're going to give you $200 or $300 million if you build this one big sewage treatment plant. And it seems that all the local politicians are terrified not to do it. And again, it's the federal government getting involved in a local issue, and they shouldn't, especially if we cannot come up with a proper design. And these are all issues around democracy, of course, and you know, fair process. But I think what's really important is that we should be getting involved locally, and this is the best chance to get some things straightened out and to get democracy back locally before we can do anything provincially or federally.
Yeah, and it will be interesting to see if on the sewage treatment project, for example, it does end up in the end being at least a democratic process that gives the people of Victoria what we want and what's best for us. I mean, there are obviously powerful forces moving us in other directions, because the initial plan that came out of the CRD staff was to spend $1 billion on a project that did absolutely zero environmental good. So that's what we were going to do, and we escaped that disaster, hopefully, by a whisker. We may not have escaped it yet.
Well, this is my big concern, is that you'd think that once you cut the head off the beast, that it's supposed to die, but not in this case. And I think the tail is flailing around still, Jack. There's a lot of powerful forces that want to have a centralized sort of a treatment plant. There's a lot of good things, a lot of money to be made in that project. But they have not opened this up truly to a really fair process, allowing a lot of people to come in to make proposals, as you've said before, and for the public to consider all our options. Now, the only way to make it truly democratic would be, number one, as a side issue, but still integral to this, is that the CRD has to be elected. I can't see another way around it. You have the provincial government now looking into this and supposed to be studying this idea of amalgamating these core municipalities of Victoria. Why would you go to the provincial government to ask them that question? Because for sure they're going to gerrymander something to rip away our control. But number two is, on a project of this size for the whole region, the proposals should come in, the best proposals should be presented, and then there should be a plebiscite. We should vote on a project of this size. Why shouldn't we? We're going to be paying taxes on this for 50 years or 100 years.
And that's one way to make sure that at least the politicians can't just jam this down our throat. But Lisa Helps has clearly said that we, meaning they, the CRD, will make the decision. So let's see how, all we can do is watch this as it plays out.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about ISIS. Our puppet Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, today or yesterday made a point that Canadians, if he's re-elected, they're going to make a law saying that Canadians cannot travel to places where terrorist governments are in control or something like that. And, you know, when I heard that, I thought, well, does that mean I can't go down to Seattle to watch the Seahawks play? Because, I mean, a lot of people know, and maybe we're not wrong, or maybe we're not right, but it's certainly what we think, is that if you look at the facts, then the #1 terrorist nation of the world for like the last 70 years, ever since the day they dropped the atomic bombs on Japan, has been the United States. And when I say that, I certainly don't mean the people of the United States, but I mean the lunatic fringe fascists who have taken over the United States and are running it today. So, and for Harper to make that statement, and the media just lets it go by without ever looking at the truth. And if you start to look at, and again, maybe I'm wrong, but if you go back to the beginning of this terrorist disaster in the Middle East, it was funded by the United States. They, in order to, what they did was they funded a fundamentalist Muslim army to attack the nation of Afghanistan, which was an ally of the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was drawn into the war, but couldn't win it because this Mujahideen army funded by the United States was given the most high-tech weaponry in the world. And the Russians couldn't fly their jets and helicopters in there, right? In the end, you know, Afghanistan collapsed, Russia, the Soviet Union collapsed. Afghanistan was completely destroyed by the fundamentalist armies that the United States had created. After the Russians left, they turned on each other and destroyed the nation. And it's gone from there to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden worked for the CIA, and the destruction of Libya, the destruction of Iraq, now the destruction of Syria. And we keep now, but we're never told this. All we're told is the story that somehow we're being attacked by, and this is the problem with this election. It's like an Alice in Wonderland election. There's just no truth out there from the politicians or the media, and Harper is allowed to make statements like that and get away with it without any questions, no deeper analysis, nothing. And again, maybe I'm completely wrong, but this is what I believe.
Jack, don't be so modest. You're pretty close to the truth. You know, and we brought this up several times, but it does warrant repeating that Harper himself helped bring people into a war zone when he allowed his ambassador in Jordan to funnel children into Syria.
Why don't you just tell that story, because it's worth repeating.
Well, it's how do you tell this story quickly? You know, Stephen Harper had a bodyguard by the name of Bruno Sacamani. He became the ambassador, Canadian ambassador to Jordan. His CSIS agent, that was his bodyguard, is now the guy that's running the ambassador or the
Jordanian embassy.
Jordanian embassy. Now he starts running a agent in Turkey, whose name I can't remember, who was smuggling people from Turkey into Syria. Now the big story was when these schoolgirls went missing in Britain.
Right, 3 schoolgirls from Britain. I think a lot of people remember that story, right?
You know, this is printed up in the Guardian and the Globe and Mail and the Ottawa Citizen. These are articles that can be checked online. And this guy was running people across the border, and he delivered those 3 schoolgirls into the hands of ISIS in Syria.
And he was working for the Canadian embassy in Jordan,
yeah,
which has a very close link to Stephen Harper. So the Canadian embassy was smuggling people from Turkey into Syria to join ISIS. And somehow this story gets completely covered up. And
you know, Bruno Sacamani, Harper's old buddy, the CSIS agent. Now, I mean, think about it. They put a CSIS agent in and created. He became an ambassador. Oh, by the way, he was in charge of Iraq also. So I mean, this is a very powerful position. Let's not forget about this. This is the truth, Jack. These are the facts as they stand. I want to be, somebody has to correct me. I think the facts stand and they're pretty strong. Now, why couldn't you just bring that up in a debate? You know, what would sink his ship worse than that? But apparently we're all supposed to have amnesia.
that's right, the other parties don't mention this story.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Why not?
You know, it all gets very strange. And as I said, look, this is not to me a real election campaign. It's some kind of a play that they're presenting to the public with a lot of actors, some of whom are acting either knowingly or unknowingly on behalf of other powers. But in the end, this is to me a real fake election, as fake as the recent BC election that elected the Liberals, which we know was fraud. They were fraudulently put in power by the NDP. We have the same situation in Ottawa. We have the same power brokers there. They're writing up this little script about this strict 3-way race, and they're trying to ignore the Green Party best they can by not letting Elizabeth May into the real debates.
Yeah.
And so what we're being dealt out here is just a bunch of hooey. It really means nothing.
I got an email, and basically the story in the email was corporate media allows Harper to lie to Canadians during debate. And there were 7 different, let's say, you know, quotation mark, lies he told, or mistruths. But the important point is, nobody ever questions him. The media, when the media starts to allow lies to be told and truth has to deal with lies, how can truth possibly win? So here they are, and maybe these are wrong, who knows? But twice during the debate, Harper said Canada has a balanced budget for this year, but the Office of the parliamentary budget officer says Canada will have a $1 billion deficit this year. Right now, maybe it's running in a surplus, but it'll have a $1 billion deficit this year. Harper's 8th deficit in a row, including, I think, I'm not sure about this, but I think including a few years ago, Harper ran the largest deficit in Canadian history. And the national debt is up $150 billion since Harper took over our country. And so he's allowed to make these statements like, Canada has a balanced budget, but we're never given the context, the facts, and people support Harper because of that.
Him on that, and he was slightly challenged, but they never really dug into it.
Another one, Harper talking about the recession. Harper said, yeah, the energy sector is shrinking, but the rest of the economy is growing. But Stats Canada says the largest contraction in the economy is really in manufacturing, not energy. And I mean, these are important points. To scuff it all off and say, yeah, we're in recession, we're not in recession, the people of Canada should know that our manufacturing sector has been shrinking for a decade, and it's because of the free trade agreements, which our governments keep signing. But that isn't an election issue either.
Yeah. Well, the real dichotomies, let's just look at this election. To me, if there's the rich and the poor in Canada, that's a dichotomy. That's real. The rich are voting for the Conservatives. The poor are not participating, or sometimes voting for the Greens or for a progressive party. You also have, which is not really recognized well, is the city folk, country folk issue in Canada, where the city folk all tend to have ideas around environmentalism and trying to protect the environment, and the country folk are trying to keep from starving to death. They need jobs. They'll do anything for jobs. So when resource extraction starts to become an industry in the rural part of the country, and that's where it's all at, people are supporting that because they don't have anything else. And so we have the old and the not very bright, as far as I'm concerned, out of it group that are voting Conservative. Then you have the young and the disenfranchised groups that are not participating because they don't see any point in it. 40% of Canadians are not going to the polls. That's not because they're lazy or something. They've been beaten down to the point where they say, why bother? And in the end, there's an analysis right now that shows that Harper's going to win this election.
Very possibly. I think where we are right now, it's clear that from where we are right now, the corporate media can make any of the three major parties win, whoever they want.
Yeah.
And if they find a scandal here or make a story there or a bad picture there, that party will go down enough and somebody else will come up enough. They can do whatever they want, and that's exactly who will win this election, whoever the corporate media and the corporate
Let's not forget, Jack, that the pollsters lied to us in British Columbia. They faked their polls and they lied to us about the results in the previous election with the NDP and the Liberals here. These are the same pollsters that are now in Ottawa. Are we supposed to start trusting the polls? These people are looking after the corporate interests. They know how to tailor questions to be understood one way or the other. And we cannot trust pollsters anymore. That'd be ridiculous to trust them.
Yeah, is climate change an issue in this election? I don't know if I've heard it mentioned.
Well, of course, the Green Party's bringing up the best they can.
Yeah. I don't hear much about the Green Party in the media I follow.
No, you don't. I mean, in the debate that
right.
Elizabeth May participated in, there was 1.5 million people watched that debate. Now, in a national debate, if had it been put on by the major networks, you'd get around 10 or 12 million people watching. So you can see where they allow this happen on the side. Elizabeth May shone in the debate. Many people thought that she was head and shoulders above the other people there.
But they won't let her into the other debates?
They won't let her anything else.
Yeah.
So,
what an attack on our democracy.
That's right.
What an attack on our democracy by not only the people running the debates, which I guess are the media, but the politicians themselves. I mean, it's a disgrace.
Why would they participate? You know, if Mulcair had any courage, and Trudeau, I mean, if they really were concerned, they'd say, hey, we're not going to debate until Elizabeth May is there talking. She's got legitimacy in this country and the issues she's talking about. Now, they had been doing a little sucking up to Elizabeth May and all trying to pretending they're friends with her. And you can see how they want a little bit of that green stuff to rub off on them a little bit. But the bottom line is if they go into those debates without her, they're snubbing fair process. This is the way it is.
Yeah, so it's a dangerous time for Canada because these just are very dangerous times. I mean, the environment is a disaster. There's I don't know, it's not a big story, of course, but there's a huge algae bloom off the west coast of North America, running, I think, from the Mexico California border all the way up to Alaska and beyond. It's toxic, it's having immense effects. They've never seen anything like it. And of course, we don't even know about it. But that's the environment, the economy. I mean,
yeah.
What can you say?
You know,
and socially, in social
Yeah.
issues, you know, you sort of feel the edges fraying. You know, things are. It's not.
They get away with so much. You know, I've made a few phone calls this week. One thing I did was just to bring up these issues. I'm always concerned about public relations firms and how they affect democracy and elections. So I phoned up the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP. I did phone the Greens, but I never got through. And I asked them one question. I said, could you tell me the names of the PR firms that you're using for your election campaign? The Conservatives answered that we use no public relations firms whatsoever. The NDP and the Liberals both have yet to answer the question. So they're hesitant to answer that question. To me, that's a huge issue because we know, especially with the NDP, the guys that stole the election here in British Columbia are moving on to Ottawa. And they're advising the NDP in Ottawa, advising Mulcair. So I don't know what that all means, Jack, but you know, we know that they're meddling in the process and it's not fair. So I'm going to take it, if they don't answer me, is that they refuse to answer the question.
And we're going to have to leave it there.
There you go.
Thank you, Walter.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
And thanks for watching this segment of Citizens Forum.
Welcome to Citizens Forum Segment 2. I'm Warren Lokke, and today I have a guest, and his name is Mike Irvine, and we will be talking about his project, the Fisheye Project, as well as something else that he recently did, which created a little bit of media buzz. So thank you for being here, Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much, Warren.
Yes, so we'll just dive right into it, literally. You defended your thesis underwater?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically April 20th, I successfully defended my thesis live from underwater over a video conference and a simultaneous webcast. So basically, that was a lot of pressure to be able to do something like that. And the reason being for it was that I really wanted to showcase what the research has been about. It was the physical embodiment of the research.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was the actual thesis about then?
So it was about using underwater web cameras, but live interactions with marine environments.
Okay.
To engage students in digging in through inquiry-based learning of marine science topics. So to initiate questions, to basically see that unseen, and spur a lot of different interaction. And
so you had like the whole setup with the mic and everything else that you were, I guess, constantly feeding back with somebody off-site, right?
Yeah, I had a full-face intercom mask. I had my main advisor on the surface, and I also had a committee at UVic, and my other advisor was in Alberta.
Okay.
So we all came together in basically a video conference setup. And on the webcast side, I found out that we actually had 15 countries, people from 15 countries tune in.
Wow.
Yeah, it's had almost 8,000 views.
You know what? That to me, when I just think about that, because I had recently defended my thesis about a year and a half prior to you, and we were in grad school at the same time.
Yep.
But I didn't have thousands of people watching my defense. I had 8 people in my room, and that was it. Nobody cared about it outside of that room that I was in terms of my supervisor and a couple of friends in the audience and the committee that I had. Now, with respect to you, I remember I did a little bit of back-end research, and I saw that you had coverage from CBC, National Geographic, the Huffington Post, BuzzFeed. I saw a BuzzFeed article of all things.
BuzzFeed article?
I think so. Yeah, there was a BuzzFeed.
Cool. I want to see that. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that there was a BuzzFeed. So there was all sorts
We had
of these.
Discovery Channel was one of the big ones that reached out.
So just this huge amount of media pressure, and I can't. How were you thinking about that at all when you were defending?
Honestly, no.
No.
I think it's almost when you go diving, and there's something that's really awesome and amazing about diving that I like is it's how serene it is. So when you're underwater, it's just you. Granted, there was a camera there, but you're really put into a serene environment that's very calming and relaxing. You focus on your breathing. You're really more present than you are about what's going on the outside. And that's something I really loved about diving, and that's actually what helped me get through my thesis defense. I was not thinking about all of these other people that are out there watching. It wasn't about that. It was just, here I am presenting this information that's really important to me. It's what I believe in. Yeah. And it's really important to also highlight and get people interested in looking at what's going on underwater. Mm-hmm. So that's basically all that was happening for me. I just was very much in the present space.
Oh, that is just truly amazing. So I'm also thinking about the logistics about all the planning and all the extra types of things to get done. Was there anything that stuck out in terms of any challenges specifically?
Challenges were convincing enough people that this was a good idea and to let me do it.
Oh, okay. There we go.
But then it was also working through a lot of the technical issues. We had no idea how to get two-way audio going to and from the diver by plugging it into the laptop.
Oh, okay.
So we had to figure out a whole adaptation system to basically have the audio coming over Skype or any different video conferencing platform that we played with to come directly down to the diver, but then so I could speak directly back up and through.
Wow.
So without anybody having to manage that.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was the first step, and it took us a while to figure that one out. But the other issues were also making sure we had the right underwater camera housing. We had to rebuild our entire system, basically our entire broadcast system at the end of November. So,
wow. What happened?
I flooded 3 underwater web cameras. We were using IP cameras, and then I just got away from that, went more towards hardware, and it made it a heck of a lot easier.
So how much money was that? Just in terms of
Actually, it was underneath a company that I was a part of that I created to build underwater web cameras. If you ever heard of the SEAL Cam down at Fisherman's Wharf?
I believe I have.
I was a part of putting that down in tandem with Eagle Wing Tours. And,
cool.
Yeah, so I used those cameras, and it was part of the company, so I was able to move things in and out.
There you go. Yeah. Move and spread the cost through that way.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to this next thing which is related to, I guess, your thesis. You have your own non-for-profit organization known as the Fisheye Project?
Yes.
Yeah, can you just tell me a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. So I'm the co-founder of the Fisheye Project, and Maeva Gauthier, she's the other co-founder. Basically, Maeva and I met about 5 years ago when we were both working on a video for the Venus Project, which is part of the Ocean Networks Canada network.
Oh, yeah.
And from just kind of that meeting and that chance meeting, it just grew into a whole lot of ideas about how can we share our experiences with the ocean, especially being a recent diver at the time, and Maeva as well. We just built up this whole way of communicating underwater to the surface. That's how it started. I was using a GoPro camera and a plumbing cap.
Wow.
Yes.
Very basic, and now it's...
And then got my hands on a full-face intercom mask. Aqualung had basically kind of helped us out a little bit there and just lent it to us for the time being, and we just slowly been building it up. But we've been increasing our message, which is basically trying to reach people anywhere and everywhere in the world through edutainment. We want to show you the ocean, get excited about it, check out what's there, see the unseen.
Well, it's always cool to see how something starts at its grassroots, and now it's slowly building up, because I know now you're starting to get involved with IMAX, for example.
Yeah.
Just tell me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So what's been happening is we've been doing some preliminary tests in the IMAX space, and in IMAX Victoria, actually.
Okay.
So they've been really generous in supporting us to actually going in and doing some of these tests to work out all the kinks. So basically what we're working on is a way that you can be in the theater and you can actually see, hear, and talk to the diver while they're anywhere in the world underwater.
Wow. So you'll be able to do that in an IMAX theater?
Yes. So with surround sound and watching something like the red rock crab the size of a school bus running at you on the screen.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, it was really neat.
Oh, that's incredible. So are there going to be any opportunities to see this anytime in the near future?
So what we're doing is we're going down to San Francisco on August 9th, well, actually to present on August 9th, so beginning of September. And we're going to be presenting in front of the IMAX entity and all the partners and affiliates and every major producer that goes to the Giant Screen Cinema Association Conference.
Oh.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah,
But what's really neat about this opportunity is that we're literally pushing to get this into IMAX theaters coming into the fall. So we could start doing live broadcasts, tying it in with education and curriculum. So we would actually be providing pre-curriculum packages for schools before they come in. Then you get the actual in-theater experience. Then you come out with post. So we're trying to do a whole integration.
I just think about that, you know, back when I was a kid and we would do field trips to the IMAX. Now having that extra bit of, you know, interaction where you can actually talk to the people on the screen, like that in itself is just, it's kind of blowing my mind right now. It's really amazing. It's going to be amazing for, you know, the kids that would be that would have that opportunity to be doing that. So
big kids and small. It's when you see it, like when we were doing some of our tests and we put it up, like
that's
you have to see it to
incredible.
believe it. It's one of those experiences you just sit there and you're in awe. It's so huge. You feel like you're diving. You're actually there. You're underwater. It's so massive.
That was the amazing thing about IMAX, because you know, back in the day, I remember I saw Ring of Fire when as a kid.
Did you see Grand Canyon as well?
Yeah, and you know how you felt, and just that vertigo feeling that you had, you know, through that large screen, and just the way the camera moved, and that's incredible just to have that, you know, really. But now it's an interactive.
It's interactive. It changes that whole cinematic experience from the tradition of being an observer to now you're a participant.
Wow.
You don't have to, but you can. You know, it creates this different dynamic flow, and that space no longer is a stagnant space. You can move in there.
Absolutely.
So that's basically what we're playing with, is different ideas, and it's moving ahead pretty fast.
Yeah.
So we're having a lot of fun doing it. Let's put it that way.
So would you would be able to have this broadcast, I guess, at multiple IMAX at a time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we can actually tether multiple IMAXs off of the same broadcast.
Oh.
Yeah.
So that's cool. So you could have like an IMAX in Victoria, an IMAX in Toronto, IMAX in London, England.
Yep.
You're all tuned into this.
Totally. Yep.
Wow.
And then the neat thing too is that we can also webcast. So, you know, if you're in another major center or space, we can actually provide you a webcast which is about 30 seconds delayed. You won't have the same level of interaction, but you get it in high def, and you basically can have that all over. Anybody can access that.
Oh, that's
on any device, any place in the world.
like I said, that would be great, you know, for everybody that has an interest in oceans and.
Totally, and you can be on the chat forum too, because we actually we also take questions, and we have a whole bunch of people on the back end through social media, so Twitter, Facebook, even on the YouTube channel that we have a lot of questions that flood in, and we also have a social media response team that answers them, and that can also, it just facilitates a really neat conversation. So if you're an ocean enthusiast, you can also participate in that conversation. It's not limited, so
great.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly, I'll just ask this question. And I was looking at the Fisheye Project website, and you guys talk about ocean literacy. Can you just explain just briefly what ocean literacy is? And
Absolutely. So ocean literacy is really about understanding our connections and our interrelated connection and relationship to the ocean, you know, and to nature. It's you know, the ocean does a lot. It regulates our climate, our weather. There's so much more. It's a food source. There's economics that are built into it, culture, identity, history. We're so interconnected with our marine environment as well as our terrestrial, and a terrestrial with a marine, that we need to understand those connections a lot more.
For sure.
We need to be building up more of those conversations, but through interactive means, more entertaining and engaging ways. So that's basically what we're trying to promote and what we're trying to build.
great. Well, thank you for being my first guest ever on this show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. So lastly, if people want to get involved or find more information, where can they get it?
So if they check us out on fisheyeproject.org, we're also on Twitter at fisheyeproject. Basically, we would encourage lots of people to reach out with any ideas they have on dive sites they would like us to cover, because we can also highlight really amazing marine spaces and marine research groups that are out there doing awesome things.
Okay.
So yeah,
great.
Definitely.
Thanks so much, Mike.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Great. Thank you.
Welcome to segment 3 of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, August the 11th. I'd like to thank again the volunteer crew and the Shaw staff that makes this program happen every week. Our guest in this segment is Saanich Councillor and CRD Director Vic Derman, and we're going to be talking about sewage treatment. So Vic, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Jack.
And where is the sewage treatment situation at right now?
Well, of course, we divided into East Side and West Side committees, and I'm really describing what's happening with the East Side. We discussed and decided upon what we were really trying to accomplish with this process, the goals and principles, if you would, including high level of treatment, optimizing climate change, maximizing resource recovery, encouraging innovation, considering integrating other parts of the waste stream into the process, and also trying to get the best environmental outcome at the lowest cost possible to the taxpayer.
Okay. So all of those things sound very important.
Yeah, they're very good. And then we went out to the general public and canvassed them about what their thoughts were, found out that essentially they agreed with the goals we established, and then also put before them a number of sites to get a sense from them what sites in the region they might find as acceptable, and got back a response that there were quite a number of sites that they thought, okay, these could be used. We wouldn't be particularly have a problem with using these sites. So that's where we're at. But I also think we're at a time of a kind of critical juncture if we're going to get things right. Hopefully this time we are.
Can I ask you, is secondary treatment still an option that's being considered?
Yes, it is in some cases.
Okay, but to go back to your, originally you started off by saying the official goals are, and one of them is maximize resource recovery, and doesn't that goal alone mean secondary is out?
Well, yes and no. When you're trying to optimize resource recovery, it's a question of where you put infrastructure primarily. So that if you're trying to use the heat out of the sewage, that you have something close by where you can economically use the heat. If you're going to look for water reuse at some point, and that usually mandates a higher level of treatment, but you want something fairly close by that you can do it in an economic fashion.
And how about gasification?
Yeah, and gasification, of course, is the biosolids that come out, and from that you can get heat, gas, convert that into electricity and things of that nature.
So can those things be done out of a secondary system?
Well, theoretically, gasification certainly can, because secondary produces biosolids like everything else. Okay. My belief is that you're far better off to go to a tertiary level of treatment, tertiary disinfected actually. It's usually not that much more expensive, and it, as you suggest, allows you to reach the kind of goals we hope to accomplish, I think, much better.
Okay, so we're at a critical point now. What's happening now?
Well, where we're at now is we've got this information back from the public, all good stuff. But now the direction that's been proposed by some in the committee is to have one consulting firm or engineering firm design two options, one for a centralized plant and one for some sort of distributed system. And then you would evaluate those options at some point, theoretically choose one and put it out for bid to the private sector. That, I think, repeats the same kind of mistake we made earlier. And in the prior project, of course, which failed over McLaughlin Point, one of the big mistakes we did was to limit the scope of investigation very, very early into what was possible, what's out there.
So you're saying that by now this isn't a done deal yet. It's a suggestion that this be done.
It's pretty close to a done deal.
Okay, and the
but
done
I'm
deal.
saying no. I think there's a better way.
Okay, and the done deal, almost done deal, is they'll look at one centralized system and one distributed system and compare them. But there are more than one distributed system out there, and if we don't look at some of them, we may be looking at the wrong one. That's, I think, what you're saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's, of course, what happened first time around.
Exactly.
We didn't look very broadly. We spent our time defending the selection we had made, and the public was more and more saying, wait a minute, we think there might be something better out there. And they had no ability to find out if there was, because we never opened up things to really investigate broadly. If we have a single firm, even two firms if we did that, designing and so forth, they might happen to design the very best thing possible, and they might not. Do you end up with the best product? It's impossible to answer, because you haven't canvassed that private sector really broadly, and you don't know.
So let me get this straight again. The CRD is considering hiring a consulting firm to give them an idea of...
Consulting firm, engineering firm, yeah.
Right. Either one central plant or one distributed system. You're saying, why doesn't the CRD have submissions from a dozen different distributed systems?
Oh, a dozen or more.
Or more.
You know, the best
Why
way...
lock all the other ideas? Because that's exactly what happened the first time
Exactly
around.
what happened. And the problem is the expertise doesn't lie with one or two firms. The expertise is spread out broadly in the private sector. Some of it very new, some of it very innovative. So what I would suggest is you take your goals that you have and you make them into a very high level, what's called request for expressions of interest. And simply sent out to industry and essentially saying this: here's what we want to accomplish. What's your best answer to doing it? How would you provide the best results for the things we want to do? Then they send them back. You'll probably get some that are, let's put it in rockets and send it to Mars, kind of ridiculous things. And you also probably get some very, very good ones. So you then fairly quickly whittle down the best to the best 3 or 5, work from there, and ultimately you come up with a project that you put out for bid. Now, you can safely say to the public at that point, look, we really did open the door to let the best and brightest ideas in. We're confident that what we have is the best of the best, and that you will get the best value for money and the best outcomes that we can possibly achieve. Why wouldn't you do that?
And that's exactly the question that we, the citizens of the CRD, should all be asking. Why wouldn't you do that? And yet,
absolutely.
It seems like we're not going to do it. And really, from you and from a guest on the show last week, is the first I've really heard that these things are happening. I mean, the public is not getting the impression that it's going to be only 2 systems, only 2 options, which is important, especially in what we keep getting told is a democratic process. Where is it?
But what's out there could be absolutely amazing. We already had a presentation from one company who suggested they would integrate other parts of the waste stream into the gasifier. So they would not only just have the solids from the sewage, they'd also put in kitchen scraps, and they'd also put in a good deal of the solid material that ends up going out to Heartland and going into Heartland, and make use of that. The advantages of that potentially, if it is accurate, are just astounding. They are talking about, if they put this in for the core area, the equivalent GHG reduction of taking over 20,000 cars off the road. That's just enormous. They're talking about avoiding infrastructure costs so that you don't have to build 3 separate infrastructures for the 3 different parts. You do it in one infrastructure. And they're talking about the potential, if it's well designed and optimized, of creating a very high level treatment system for the region, essentially at no net cost to the taxpayers.
Okay, so that sounds like the dream version, but at least it should get looked at.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't sit here and say, hey, I know that this is the best thing since sliced bread. I know this is going to work. No, you have to take something like that and you have to subject it to very careful evaluation. But what if it does work? What if you can accomplish those things? The taxpayer finding that essentially the revenues being created are sufficient to accommodate the debt of building something, and there is nothing on their tax bill.
And it's worth noting that the original CRD staff plan has a lifetime cost of $2.3 billion.
In that range, yeah.
So if these guys are saying we can do it because of the sale of resources at no net cost, I mean, who knows if that's true, but at least it should be looked at.
You absolutely have to. I mean, as an elected official, my responsibility to the taxpayer is to try to make sure that I spend their money as wisely as possible. Yeah, I could build a sewage treatment project that worked for $1 billion, and as you say, a life cycle cost of close to $2 billion or over, but that's not responsible in my mind.
So what's the push now? Where is the push coming from within the CRD for this current plan of just looking at one centralized and one distributed system?
It's probably a variety of sources. When we reinstituted a West Side Committee and East Side Committee, there was pressure on to get this done quickly and to make sure that you did it in a time frame that wouldn't lose federal and provincial funding and things of that nature. And a plan was kind of cobbled together very quickly. Some have described the process as designing the airplane as you're flying it through the skies, which is not all that inaccurate, but also not that good. And we just went off in a rush, especially the east side, because we started a number of months later than the west side. This proposal
Vic, I'm afraid
was,
we're out of time. We'll have to take it up again next time.
Absolutely.
So, Vic, thank you very much. Thank you very
My
much
pleasure.
for
My
the
pleasure.
good work you've done on this issue. And everybody, please keep your eyes wide open on this. It's a huge project, and thank you for watching this segment of Citizens Forum. Welcome to the last segment of Citizens Forum, being filmed on Tuesday, August the 11th. Our guest in this segment is Norm Ryder. Norm's been on the show a few times before, and we're going to be talking about a few different things. So Norm, you wanted to start off just about a newspaper story you saw about how difficult it is to apply for social assistance. And I actually saw the same story, and I was kind of not only amazed and shocked, but, you know, why do they make it so difficult? Well, I know why. But.
Yeah, I looked at that article and it brought up all sorts of things that I started thinking about the plight of people on social assistance. That includes some homeless, people with disabilities. It's the whole group with them, how awkward things are. That article was referring to apply for social assistance, they had to go online to do it. Well, I don't know of many homeless people that have a secure internet connection, and they can't just go to the library and use the internet connection there and have any degree of security, because...
How long is the form? Or they said it
know,
took like 30 minutes or something to... I can't remember, but it sounded like a very complex form, and I've dealt with these complex forms in different situations, and they're difficult to fill out.
I think the article said that there were 50 different page views that had to be made to look at it. Now, how long the form itself is, I don't think it's that long. And it takes more than half an hour, which most libraries limit you to half an hour. So if you get kicked off the system and have to re-log in, you would have to start all over again. Well, if it takes more than half an hour, you may never be able to complete it.
Here in Victoria, they've changed it now, so you've got, I think, up to 2 hours at one time.
Well,
but you know, we had somebody on from TAPS, I think, months ago, Together Against Poverty Society, and I remember he brought up, maybe it wasn't when he was on the show, but maybe I heard him on the radio or something, and he sort of brought up that same issue of how difficult Christy Clark has made it for the people at the very bottom of the ladder who are just hanging on. And you want to get just a little bit of welfare so you can get some food or something, and it's just like roadblock after roadblock that the government, Ms. Clark and her friends, put in front of them.
Well, I think actually it starts at the federal government level, where they've been offloading it to the province, who offloaded it down. And of course, the homeless person is the last person to be able to fight back, so they have to carry the load themselves.
That's right.
And when you talk about just getting a little bit of money for food, that was another issue that I think a homeless person gets $235 a month, which doesn't buy a lot of food, especially when you have no place to cook it. But the price of good food is going to start going up quite a bit in the next little while because of
It's already going up.
well, that's exactly because of the drought conditions worldwide, or not worldwide, but on the West Coast. So here you've got these people struggling to get food. They can't get proper food, which contributes to health problems, both mental and physical issues, which is going to increase costs elsewhere. But the whole social assistance structure has not, shall we say, improved conditions for people since, I believe it's 2007. Well, you know how much your cost has gone up just to live from 2007. Well, these people, they have no room to maneuver, that they just keep getting pressed down.
It's murder. I mean, I can't really think of another term for it. When we have a country where the people who run the country, and personally I think that's the corporations and their politicians, federal and provincial, and their media, which plays a big role in getting public acceptance for this disaster, this homeless disaster. I mean, when you're putting people out on the streets with nowhere to live, and you're not even, because if you're homeless, you don't get the rent segment of, so all you're getting is, I think you said $235 a month, is that something like that?
And if you do have a place to live, you get something like less than $400 a month more.
You
well,
have to pay for it.
Can you find a place for that?
You can't. So, I mean, I don't know what other word to call it except for deliberate murder. And there's no need for it, because in this country, going back to when I was growing up, the people at the bottom weren't treated like that. The people at the bottom, I mean, they were more economically deprived, but there wasn't homeless people. You know, it was a fraction of the problem we have today, and it's been deliberately caused.
It's been deliberately caused, and I also think a lot of it is they're spending the money with the police and with a number of other services that I'm quite sure if they put more money into the social assistance system and help those people, it'd lower a lot of police costs, prison costs, a lot of costs.
At least the police could start doing the job they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Instead of spending their time, so much of their time, dealing with the mentally ill on the streets and getting the homeless out of all of our parks every morning and getting them settled in the evening. And remember, this is deliberate. The people who run this country have deliberately created this scenario. They know what the scenario is. They know it's really screwing up our healthcare system. And they know that police time, huge amounts of police, and they know the whole populace has to deal with this, because we all have to deal with these people. And why do they have to be on the street when there's no need for it?
I think it's
and they won't let us solve it.
I think it's part of the divide and conquer mentality. If you've got people running around and everyone pretty much is sort of, well, they know they're not far from being in a homeless situation the way the economy is going. And so if everyone's twitchy about that and scrambling to just stay that one step above the marginalized level, they've got control.
And it really undermines our society. You know, the people who run the country, I think, are deliberately undermining our society in many ways. And the creation of homelessness and poverty and putting the mentally ill on the streets is a part of it. We were going to talk a little bit about WorkSafe as well, formerly known as workers' compensation. Did you want to talk a bit about the PTSD issue or about the situation you found yourself in?
Well, with the PTSD, I actually saw an interesting piece on CBC just today that a widow of an RCMP officer that had PTSD and I believe died, I'm not sure the whole details there, has put out a video about PTSD with a number of different police or retired police officers talking about their experiences, which weren't all that much different from this Lisa Jennings that we had on the show a while ago. That as a first responder, basically comparable to a police officer in that sense. She too has it that it seems to be a very major issue for these first responders.
I can sure understand police officers
Oh.
getting a post-traumatic stress disorder. I mean, you are put into situations that are very, very difficult to deal with, and sometimes on an ongoing basis.
Well, this is it.
It's tough.
Between,
And
as
we
a-
pretend it's not happening.
yes, that between the paramedics who see all the same things the police do just about, the firemen must be experiencing the same thing, and of course the police officers, that there just isn't enough attention being paid to it. That it was good to see this widow put this out, that, and it is getting picked up nationally if it's on CBC, which we do have
So
to
I
start.
didn't see the story, but I guess what happened is she's a widow because her husband,
Yeah.
retired police officer, had PTSD and committed suicide. Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's, I gather, what happened.
Yeah. And as a society, we sort of pretend that it's like the old cowboy movies where you get shot at and you know, a minute later you're laughing or the police movies today, everything. They pretend there's no consequences, but that's not what human beings are. There are long-term consequences, and they're disastrous, and we pretend they don't happen.
Well, I had a person the other day tell me that, well, if you're worried about PTSD, you shouldn't have gone into police work anyways. So, sort of suck it up and get over it. And I thought, that's not really the way to approach it.
That's great. Yeah, what can you say? I actually think that I have a mild case of PTSD, just from the traumas of life that we all have to go through, but it's very mild compared to, I think many millions of us probably have mild cases of PTSD.
I was going to say that I think everyone seems to just have a little bit of it, but some of them it gets really out of control.
Oh, absolutely.
That in my case, actually, they tell me that people spend a lot of time in intensive care come down with PTSD, and I definitely recognize symptoms within me that when I had the operation to remove the tumor, all tied in with my issues with WorkSafe, I spent a lot of time in intensive care, and I do know that I came out of there totally not the same person. Now, we all have some situation like that where somewhere our body just has had all it can handle, whether it's mental, physical, or both.
Emotional.
Yes, it's just, and your system just goes into a shutdown mode. I can't deal with this anymore. And I really think that's what it is with everyone with PTSD. It's triggered differently, different reasons behind it, and some of there were major trigger events, such as what the police or the various.
Norm, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for talking about these issues. Okay. And thank you all for watching this week's Citizens Forum. Goodbye.